Is there a dark side to life in Denmark? I have now made over 60 videos on all the great things about the place, but let it be said, Denmark is not for everyone. In this video, I'll tell you about 7 types of people that shouldn't move to Denmark. Let's see if you feel identified. Reason number 1 is you don't drink alcohol. There's a lot of alcohol in Denmark social life, right? So we talk about beer, liquors, wine, you name it, right? As part of the social life in Denmark, there's like a lot of this. Come to Denmark, for instance, for your studies, as I did, or as a young person, and want to socialize. If you don't drink, it's gonna get weird fast. And just I remember a few years ago, right? Like I was going out with friends, like 3-4 times a week, partying a lot as well and so on. For 1 month, I said like, okay, I'm not gonna be drinking for the whole month. And it was really hard. And again, I'm not a big drinker. You'll almost never see me drunk, right? But there was almost in every setup, at least a beer, at least a glass of wine, at least something, right? And all my friends all the time were asking me, like, hey, Mario, what's wrong with you? Why are you not drinking, right? So the moment you're older and have a family, maybe this doesn't apply as much. Like I hardly drink now, but I think, and I also think like people accept it better, but at the same time, it can also get pretty weird. In South America, where I'm from, or in South Europe, this is definitely a lot more uncommon, right? I mean, like you drink when you go partying, but it's like here, it's almost every occasion. Reason number 2 is you can't stand cold weather for too long. Look, Denmark is not that cold, so it's never too long under like 0 degrees, right? But it's cold enough for a long time that makes it a problem or a no-go for a lot of people. Expect like cold for like what? October, November, December, January, February, March. Around there. Sometimes October is okay, sometimes April is cold, you never know, right? But at least 6 months-ish are pretty cold. And then on top of that, you have the rain, the wind, and so on, and you have a handful, right? So there are of course strategies on how to cope with this, and I made a whole video linked over here on how to survive the cold in Denmark. But if you are the type of person who loves being outdoor all the time, like Denmark and Scandinavia are definitely not the place to be, especially again in winter. Reason number 3 is you can't cope with darkness. And look, maybe you are the type of person who doesn't really care too much about the cold. And even sometimes there's some persons that like even enjoy the cold more than like having a nice warm weather, and that's fine. But look, one of the problems that you have in Denmark is that it gets very, very, very dark, right? So darkness sometimes can become a lot more harder to handle than the cold itself. Like November, December are very, very dark here in Denmark. Like it gets dark. Like if you look at 8 in the morning, it's dark. If you look at 4 in the afternoon, it's dark. If you look sometimes at 3 p.m. it's already dark. It's like midnight dark. It can be quite freaky, and you need to cope with it. It's definitely a mindset shift. Again, it's not like you just put clothes on and it's fine. You need to basically take vitamins. You need to be a bit more social. You need to have all this hygge mentality, do more sports indoors. I mean, it can be pretty interesting, right? So, and I'd say like this is definitely not for everyone. I know people like colleagues and friends that they moved to Denmark and they moved to Scandinavia and they just couldn't cope with the darkness. Like what I do myself, as I said in the other video as well, is that I try to at least travel 1 month in between 1st November and 31st Jan, like around a month abroad. I mean, that makes me help a lot, but otherwise it can get pretty nasty, again, if you're not used to it. Okay, moving on is that you are ambitious and you want to stand out. So look, Denmark is a very egalitarian society. It's part of the national character that here you're not better than anyone else. So if you really want to stand out, if you are a kind of ultra high performer, super ambitious and overachiever, this is not the right place. So you'll either be pushed down back to earth or you just lose the motivation. Doesn't mean that you can't aim big here. So, I mean, of course, there's people that become the CEO of a big company. There's people that get definitely an ambitious career or like an ambitious life. That's definitely possible here, but you'll not get the same vibes or the same support you'll get in some place like New York or Shanghai or London and so on, where people are like working really, really hard, pushing really hard to change the world and so on and so on. Here, it's more like slow and steady. It's a great place to live. But again, like in terms of like, if you're kind of this ultra overachiever, I wouldn't say that's definitely not the place. And to put it into perspective, the most ambitious Danes I have met, so the guys that I met during like school, that were kind of that, you say, okay, this person's ambitious, or even during my internships and studies, they all left Denmark, right? So they all went to UK, US, you name it, right? And they were not in Denmark for that kind of that period in their career where they're like, okay, we really want to make a big change. I mean, we want to really push hard, and they moved out of Denmark. So that's a statement when the most ambitious Danes move out of the country. A lot of them come back the moment they want to have kids and they have already made a difference and they just want to chill a bit more and like, okay, Denmark again is a great place for that. But if you're in the moment that you really want to push your career into the maximum, again, not the right place. Not a problem for me. I think the work-life balance here that you have is amazing, right? But again, like if you're the type of person who don't care about that and just want to go gung-ho, again, again, not the place. Next up is that you have too much money. And this is a bit controversial as well, but there's a point where if you have too much money, it just doesn't make financial sense to live in Denmark. So if you have already made a difference in your career and you're basically living off from your capital gains and investments, like some people do the moment, you get to that stage, Denmark is not really a place to be because first, like the capital gains are the highest in the world. So if you want to live from your investments, you need to have a lot more in investments to let's say, live from these investments in Denmark that it would be like if you would be like in almost any other country in the world. And on top of that, the moment you want to live from your investments and you don't have an actual income, Denmark is a place that is very expensive. Like manual labor is expensive, and like if you don't really need to work because you're living from your investments. You likely get a much better deal for yourself somewhere else. And again, the reason is that Denmark is an egalitarian place. If you're too rich, you might be better off moving to somewhere else. If you're curious on this a bit more, so in my investing course, there will be link down in the video description. I made a whole video to explain the exact calculations on when is it better to leave Denmark and move to another country financially speaking, right? So when you put all the investments that you have and all the time horizons and the cost per month and cost per year that you're expecting as well and so on, they will basically tell you like, okay, what is the sweet spot to basically say bye-bye to Denmark? I know it sounds a bit mean to say, okay, leave Denmark when you have too much money instead of supporting the country, but like, okay, like there's a point where you also need to think about yourself. And on that note, I mean, as you know, like Denmark is a highly taxed and highly regulated place. So if you're a person who's like very libertarian, like just forget about Denmark, right? So Denmark is again a very heavily regulated place. If you do want to live like a free life, don't have a lot of many rules, and you just be more of a free spirit, Denmark and Scandinavia as a whole are not a place to be. Next up is you expect people to be spontaneous and friendly. So it's definitely more work to make friends in Denmark than is in other countries, right? It's of course possible to have a thriving social life and to have many friends, but you need to work a lot harder in Denmark for that than in other places. And this is especially true if you come here as an adult. The moment you have family and you have kids, you need to work on it. You need to work really hard on it. It's like straightforward easy, right? So in a way, it feels like the social interactions are also regulated. Like in many ways, you want to meet up with friends and they will like look in their calendar and tell you, okay, we can meet in like 3 weeks or in 4 weeks. Like not always, right? And not for everyone, but that's kind of not uncommon here, right? And don't get me wrong, people are very nice. Like just don't expect the warmness of like South America, Africa, Middle East, as well and so on. There's just a bit more distance here. And people, of course, are less touchy and so on. Another point that can be a bit controversial, right? But like keep in mind that you as a foreigner will never really be Danish. So if you really want to become a Dane, you will really have a hard time, or at least a much harder time than if you want to become, for instance, like a Canadian or American or Brazilian or Australian, right? So where you can just more easily become part of the country, right? Like I'm a Danish citizen now, like I'm officially a Dane, right? But I think like every time I talk with people and the feeling I get is that there's a difference between being a real Dane and being a Danish citizen. And again, I personally don't mind this and I have absolutely no problem with this. But if this is something that is important to you, that you really want to be adopted by the country and be part of that, you might be at the wrong place. It might be a bit of a harder time for you to get around this. Last point is you are not moving to Copenhagen or maybe Arhus. So look, a small town Denmark, which can broadly be defined, or at least I broadly define as everything that is not Copenhagen and maybe Arhus, can be quite boring. I would never do it myself, right? And the exception is, of course, if you go studying, because anywhere you go studying and make friends and do exchanges and so on, that can be really fun. But if you're moving for work in a small town like Jutland as well, it's like it can be a big battle on how much you offset, this cold and darkness and the social life and the small town that you need the car and so on, and the non-exciting social life as well and so on, with the incredible work-life balance and like security and safety for the kids as well and so on that you get in Denmark. I would definitely fly in and see the different places you might be potentially thinking about moving before making a big commitment, because it is a big change. It's like small town Italy, small town France, that may be pretty cool, but I don't know, small town Denmark is definitely doesn't look like the top of my list for sure. And that's it. Again, guys, this is just some people that might not have the best experience in Denmark, but overall I still think, and as you probably constantly see, Denmark is a fantastic place to live, a fantastic place to raise your family, a fantastic place to progress in your career. And if you enjoyed this video, you should definitely check this one out, where I tell you the exact specific ways you can go through to piece things off. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again next week.